They didn't tell you the whole story. From the day you entered this world, you were led to believe that your hands are only meant for handling the physical, to grab, to carry, to build, to work. But what if that's only a sliver of the truth? What if your hands were never just made of skin and muscle, but are something far more potent, receivers, transmitters, and bridges to a field that most never learn to see? Since your first breath, your hands have been shaping the environment around you, not just in visible ways, but through the vibrations they emit. Every touch, every movement carries energy, and that energy doesn't disappear. It interacts with the space around you. Whether you're aware of it or not, every gesture has an effect. It shifts something in the invisible fabric that surrounds and permeates all life. And when that power goes unchecked, when it's used mindlessly, it doesn't just affect your outer world. It destabilizes your inner state, throwing your emotions, thoughts, and energy into disarray. This isn't an abstract idea, nor is it wishful thinking. It's been studied, documented, and passed down through thousands of years. The ancient traditions weren't just symbolic, they were practical manuals for understanding the human body's interface with the subtle world. They carried this wisdom in rituals, symbols, and oral teachings that cautioned, use with discernment, because misuse has consequences. You've been taught to believe that your hands are instruments of labor, that your value lies in how effectively you can manipulate the physical world. But this conditioning has blinded you to a more profound truth. Your hands are more than tools. They are extensions of your energetic self. They're not just part of your body. They are conduits for your consciousness, designed to influence what lies beyond the physical. Civilizations from every corner of the earth knew this. Long before science began catching glimpses of it through the lens of modern instruments, our ancestors encoded this understanding into every sacred practice. Mudras, energy healing, symbolic gestures, they weren't just cultural artifacts. They were applications of a deeper knowing, a knowing that the body emits a field, and the hands are the most precise conductors within that field. Modern biophysics has confirmed what sages knew intuitively. The human hand emits subtle but measurable electromagnetic energy. These emissions grow stronger when we focus, when we care, when we feel. In moments of prayer, of healing, of stillness, your hands are not passive, they light up, they broadcast. And it's not just your palms or fingers. The ends of your fingertips are intricately tied to systems running through your body, energy meridians that operate far older than written language. When you hold your hands in particular shapes or move them with intention, you're not merely forming symbols, you're creating signals, broadcasting precise vibrational instructions into the fabric of reality. But in today's world, that sensitivity has been drowned out, replaced by the constant tapping on screens, by habitual swipes, by unconscious movement. You're trained to use your hands constantly, but never taught how to use them consciously. The result? Your energy becomes chaotic. Each day you unknowingly send mixed signals into the field, some affirming, others confusing, many contradictory. Over time, that noise compounds, affecting your mood, your clarity, your circumstances. Because everything you do with your hands influences energy, whether you realize it or not. And if you're not doing it on purpose, you're doing it by accident. That's where most people live, in a storm of signals they don't control, wondering why life feels unbalanced, disjointed, or stuck. This isn't about mystical fantasy. It's about vibrational resonance. Every emotion has a frequency. Every thought carries a tone. And your hands, beautiful expressive instruments, are the medium through which those inner states become actions. When you place your hands on your heart in a moment of compassion, when you clench your fists in anger, when you raise a palm to send peace or shield yourself from harm, you're tuning your whole system to a frequency. And the field doesn't judge. It doesn't label one gesture as good and another as bad. It simply reflects, like a mirror that shows you not just your reflection, but your vibration. Ancient cultures emphasized training before energy work for exactly this reason. Without awareness, power turns into noise. Without understanding, sacred gestures become unstable signals. You may think you're calling in peace, but without emotional clarity, you're broadcasting confusion. That's why initiates in spiritual lineages weren't handed techniques overnight. They were taught slowly, methodically, with emphasis on inner purification and self-awareness. Because your hands don't just move energy, they amplify it. Whatever you carry inside gets projected outward with even greater intensity once your hands come into play. And most people carry a storm. Unresolved wounds, anxious loops, emotional residue. When they use their hands unconsciously, they amplify that turbulence. And the field, loyal and neutral, echoes it back. This knowledge wasn't lost. It was hidden. Not because it was false, but because it was too real, too dangerous for systems built on disempowerment. Because once you realize that the most powerful healing tool, the most responsive transmitter, the most sacred conductor, is right at the end of your arms, everything changes. You stop needing to be fixed. You stop depending on external tools to access peace, clarity, or alignment. You become your own healer, your own guide. Look at your hands, not with judgment or detachment, but with reverence. Every line, every curve, every angle is part of a language, one that speaks to the unseen. Your hands aren't random, they're patterned, geometrically precise, vibrationally tuned, just like the spirals of galaxies, the fractals of leaves, or the symmetry of a seashell. Your hands embody sacred structure. When ancient traditions taught mudras, they weren't offering decoration. They were giving codes, physical keys that unlock inner pathways. Holding your fingers in specific arrangements can shift how energy flows through your system. It can open, seal, ground, or lift your vibration depending on the shape, the tension, and your intention. It's not pretend, it's precision. The thumb to forefinger connection, the spread of the fingers, the curl of the wrist, they all have energetic consequences. And cultures from India to Egypt, from the Andes to the Himalayas, independently discovered the same principles. That's not coincidence, that's convergence. Truth showing up again and again through different expressions because it was never meant to be exclusive, it was meant to be remembered. In some cases, even modern science is catching up. We now understand how focused thought and emotion change electromagnetic output, heart rate coherence, brainwave entrainment, even photon emissions from the skin have all been studied. And guess which part of the body tends to emit the most distinct patterns? The hands. But the way you've been taught to use them in the modern world is a kind of deactivation. You scroll, you click, you text. And while these motions have their place, they come at a cost when done constantly without awareness. They condition your nervous system to stay reactive, scattered, and externally oriented. You lose sensitivity to your own field. You stop feeling the subtle hum of energy that was once as natural as breath. Every gesture you make carries a charge. Every unconscious movement adds noise to your field. But every conscious movement adds coherence. You don't have to become a monk or a master to start working with this. The first step is presence. When you begin to feel your hands again, not just physically, but energetically, you open the door. Try holding them in stillness, gently apart from your body with your eyes closed. Breathe, feel what moves between them, warmth, tingles, a pull. That's not imagination. That's your field coming into alignment with your attention. And that attention is everything. This is where power returns, not in force, but in focus. Not in controlling others, but in learning to control your own signal. You become the one shaping the field instead of being shaped by it. You stop leaking energy through aimless motion. You begin to use your hands not just to do, but to direct, to bless, to center, to heal. When your inner state aligns with your hand gestures, the effect becomes exponential. Thought becomes intention. Emotion becomes magnetism. Movement becomes transmission. And reality, both internal and external, starts to respond. This isn't theory, it's lived experience for those who dare to remember. And this is just the beginning. The moment you understand your hands are more than mechanical tools, the world begins to shift. What once seemed solid becomes fluid. What once felt random begins to reveal its pattern. Your hands are the interface, not between you and your phone, but between you and the field of life itself. Every motion they make is part of a conversation. The question is, are you speaking with clarity, or are you just making noise? And imagine every movement you make with your hands as a note played on a silent instrument. The world may not hear it audibly, but it responds just the same. When your hand tightens in fear, when it shakes in anger, when it opens in compassion, each action sends a frequency, a tone, a signal, and the universe listens, not metaphorically, literally. Because the field isn't passive, it's responsive. It reads energy, not intention. It reflects vibration, not wishful thinking. That's why it doesn't matter whether you mean well. What matters is what you're broadcasting, and your hands are your loudest speaker. In ancient times, people knew this. That's why sacred movements were never casual. Rituals were precise. Whether it was a prayer mudra, a healing hold, or a ceremonial gesture to open a space, none of it was left to chance. It was studied, honed, practiced. Because they understood something modern culture forgets, that energy moves through structure, through geometry, through intention and motion. And nothing structures energy like the human hand. Even in the absence of conscious training, you've felt it. The touch of a loved one that calms you instantly. The way a single hand raised in silence can still a crowd. The way a stranger's hand on your back can either comfort or disturb, depending on their emotional state. We dismiss it as intuition or body language or unspoken communication. But underneath those terms is something more elemental: energy transfer. Your hands transmit what you carry, and they absorb what others release. They are not shields, they are channels. This is why people often feel drained after certain social interactions or physical contact. The hands become portals, and if you don't know how to manage what flows through them, you end up absorbing frequencies that were never yours to carry. But the opposite is also true. With awareness, your hands become vessels of healing, of clearing, of focus. You can direct energy with precision, not through force, but through clarity. You can remove tension from your own body. You can soothe anxiety. You can bring peace into a chaotic room without ever speaking. All through conscious movement. It begins, always, with the awareness of form. Not the appearance of the hand, but the shape it takes. Each mudra, each position, each subtle flex of the fingers holds significance. When your thumb touches your forefinger, you're not just forming a circle, you're completing a circuit. You're engaging an ancient electrical loop that changes how energy flows through the body. That small contact enhances focus, brings stillness, stabilizes your field. It's been used in meditation traditions for millennia, not for aesthetic, for function. This is sacred geometry in motion. Because sacred geometry isn't just symbols drawn in sand or etched on temple walls. It's alive in the way your body moves. It's encoded in the curves of your fingers, the space between your palms, the arc of your arms when you lift them in surrender or invocation. You don't need to study diagrams to use it. Your body already knows. The key is remembering how to listen. And that listening begins with stillness, not inactivity, but inner stillness. When your breath slows and your thoughts settle, you begin to feel the subtle, the space between moments, the vibration beneath movement. That's when the language of energy reveals itself, not in noise, but in quiet patterns. You've likely had glimpses of it, the sensation in your hands when you meditate, the invisible weight when you hold them out in silence, the pull, the warmth, the pressure. That's the field responding. That's energy flowing. Your body doesn't need explanation to feel it. It just needs permission. So give it. Let your hands become instruments again. Not instruments of production or typing or reaching for the next distraction. Instruments of coherence, of clarity, of care. Try this. Before your next interaction, before your next difficult conversation or moment of doubt, hold your hands together gently. Not tightly, not rigidly. Just bring them together, palm to palm. Breathe. Notice how quickly your system begins to shift. That's not magic, that's coherence. That's what happens when your body feels safe enough to stabilize, when the chaotic signals begin to fade, when your breath and your gesture align. You don't need to be in a temple. You don't need to be dressed in ceremonial robes. You only need presence and a willingness to feel. Over time, these moments compound. They build a new baseline. Your nervous system begins to trust stillness. Your energy field begins to strengthen. You start to carry a different signal into every room you enter. Not because you said something, but because your body is saying it for you. You walk with coherence, and coherence is contagious. People feel it, they lean into it, they begin to calm even without knowing why, because we are energetic creatures first. Words come later, energy comes first. And your hands are how that energy speaks. This is why learning to use them with intention isn't a spiritual accessory. It's foundational. It's hygiene, like brushing your teeth or cleaning your space. If you neglect your energetic hygiene, things get clogged. confused, static builds, and the static over time becomes your norm. Most people live in that static. They don't even know what clarity feels like anymore. But clarity isn't loud. It doesn't shout. It hums. And when your hands move from that hum, they become tuning forks. They bring order to the field. Even science is starting to catch the frequency. Studies on intention, coherence, electromagnetic resonance, all pointing to the same core truth. Energy responds to directed focus. And the hands amplify that focus. They give shape to intention. Think of them like calligraphy brushes. You're writing in the air, painting in the field, carving currents into the invisible. Each movement, whether conscious or not, leaves a signature, and that signature attracts its match. So, if your gestures are infused with anxiety, tension, or disconnection, you'll see those frequencies mirrored back in your life, in your relationships, in your opportunities. But when your gestures carry presence, when they arise from clarity, from compassion, from grounded focus, the world responds in kind. This is the difference between chaos and creation, between reaction and response. You are already affecting the field with every move you make. The only question is, are you choosing the frequency? Because once you know this, you can't go back to ignorance. You begin to feel the weight of your gestures, not as a burden, but as a responsibility, as a privilege, as a calling. You realize that every handshake, every wave, every touch carries intention. You become more mindful, not paranoid, just aware. And that awareness starts to change you. It softens the aggression in your reactions. It tempers the tension in your movements. It brings grace into your daily routines. You stop flailing and start flowing. You begin to shape your energy instead of being shaped by everything outside of you. This is the essence of embodied practice. It's not about looking spiritual. It's about becoming stable. It's about learning to regulate your frequency, not just when you're alone in meditation, but in the middle of your real life, at work, in conflict, at home, in love. Because energy doesn't stop flowing when life gets hard. If anything, that's when it matters most. And your hands? They're the steering wheel, the dial, the anchor. They can draw your attention inward when everything outside pulls it away. They can ground your breath when anxiety tries to fragment it. They can soothe your nervous system when words aren't enough. That's not superstition, that's biology. Touch affects the vagus nerve. Hand positions affect the parasympathetic system. Pressure points send signals through fascia networks and meridians. These aren't theories, they're facts. And yet we treat our hands like they're only good for holding objects or making gestures in conversation. But they're holding more than you realize. They're holding the potential to rewrite your state in any given moment. They're holding the pattern of your energy. They're holding the memory of every movement you've ever made. And they're waiting for you to slow down long enough to remember what they are. You don't need to memorize 1,000 techniques. You don't need to be a certified anything. What you need is presence. Start there, with breath, with stillness, with the simple act of watching your own hands as they move through the world. Start noticing how they react when you're triggered, how they clench, how they point, how they protect, how they push. Then ask yourself, what am I signaling right now? And more importantly, what do I want to signal? Because the choice is yours, always has been. Your hands aren't waiting for a teacher, they're waiting for your attention, for your willingness to remember what they already know. The journey is internal, but the transformation is external. When you change the way you move, you change the energy you live in. And the energy you live in shapes everything, from your mood to your relationships to the opportunities that find you. So, begin. One gesture at a time, one breath at a time, one moment of awareness again and again. This is how you become the transmitter, not the echo. The origin, not the reaction. The hands remember. It's time you do too. There's a silence that comes over you when you begin to truly sense what your body has been whispering all along. A silence not of absence, but of alignment. The hands, those ever-moving, ever-doing parts of you, begin to still, and in that stillness, something old stirs awake. A language older than any spoken tongue. A current, familiar, yet forgotten. It isn't mystical in the way people tend to think of mysticism. It's elemental, like water finally remembering it's part of the ocean. You don't need sacred music or incense to tune into this. You need something much rarer in the modern world: attention. Not fragmented attention, the kind you spend on screens and endless tasks, but full settled presence. When you sit, even for a few minutes with your palms resting gently open and your breath deep and unforced, something shifts. The noise recedes, the field becomes audible. Not with your ears, but with something deeper. You feel it, a pulse, a warmth, a pressure. The feedback loop begins. Your body knows what to do. It always has. The problem is, you've been trained out of trusting it. You've been conditioned to believe that knowledge lives in the intellect, that truth must come from outside you, from experts, from textbooks, from others. But the truth is, your body holds more wisdom in its silence than most words ever will. And your hands, those quiet transmitters, are your body's clearest voice. In every tradition where energy mattered, hands were sacred. They were seen as spiritual tools, not just functional limbs. In the temples of ancient Kemet, initiates would spend years learning how to move their hands before they were allowed to speak certain words or conduct healing rites. Not because they were being delayed, but because the elders knew the danger of unaligned gesture. A hand moved from ego opens a door you might not be able to close. A hand moved from clarity becomes a beacon. The difference is night and day. You are not here to mimic ancient rituals out of context. You are here to remember what they were pointing to. Not the symbol, but the principle behind the symbol. Form channels force. Movement shapes meaning. The body, when used intentionally, becomes the medium through which the inner becomes outer. That's not poetry. That's how the universe works. Think of music. Notes alone mean nothing, but arranged properly, timed, spaced, tuned, they become a song. Your energy is no different. Your thoughts are notes. Your emotions are harmonies. Your breath is the rhythm. And your hands, they conduct. They pull the pattern into form. But here's the thing. Most people are conducting without realizing they're doing it. They're waving their hands in stress, clenching in fear, typing with resentment, and all of it is creating a mess in the field. Imagine a conductor with no sheet music, no sense of time, no awareness of harmony, just waving their baton at random. That's what the average energy field looks like. Not because people are bad or broken, but because they've forgotten that they're even holding the baton. The chaos you see around you isn't accidental. It's collective dissonance. It's the result of billions of untrained transmitters broadcasting noise into a responsive grid. That's why everything feels overstimulated, unstable, unpredictable. It's not because the world is falling apart. It's because coherence has become rare. Attention has become fragmented. Gesture has lost its root and meaning. But the beautiful thing about energy is that it doesn't take millions to recalibrate. It takes resonance. One clear signal can change an entire space. You've seen it. Walk into a room where someone is calm, present, grounded. They don't have to say a word. The room shifts. The pace changes. People speak softer, breathe deeper. That's resonance. You can be that person, not by trying to fix others, not by preaching or teaching, but by becoming coherent within yourself. And your hands are how you anchor that coherence. They give your energy direction, not metaphorically, literally. If your emotions are like flowing water, your hands are the banks of the river. They shape the current. Without them, energy floods everywhere. With them, it finds purpose. This is why you can't afford to be careless with your gestures. Every time you point, every time you clench, every time you reach out with frustration or shut down with fear, you're writing a pattern into your own field. And the field doesn't forget. It holds that frequency until something disrupts it. Usually more noise, more movement, more confusion. But stillness. That's the great disruptor. That's what clears the pattern. When you move with stillness inside, your gestures become intentional. They carry power. They're no longer just reactions, they're choices. This is the pivot point, the shift from unconscious living to conscious creation. Let's go deeper. Have you ever watched a martial artist move through a form slowly? Every movement placed with precision, every breath aligned with the body? That's not for show. That's energetic mastery. Every stance, every extension of the hand is communicating with the field, not just the physical environment, but the unseen currents that move through it. Tai Chi, Qigong, sacred dance, even ancient forms of prayer, they all share this one principle. Energy moves where awareness flows, and the hands are its guides. When you begin to bring that principle into your everyday life, things change. Simple tasks, cooking, washing, brushing your child's hair, become different. Not because the task changes, but because you change. Your intention comes online. You stop leaking energy. You stop rushing. Your body becomes a vessel of presence. Even the way you greet someone can become transformative. A handshake given with clarity, a hand placed over the heart with sincerity. A blessing made with no words, just fingers held in silent prayer. These are not gestures for show, they're transmissions. You can feel this truth if you pause long enough. Put one hand over your chest and one over your belly. Close your eyes, breathe. After a moment, you'll feel a warmth, a shift. That's coherence beginning to return. Your own energy realigning with itself. No mantras, no rituals, just hands and breath. That's all it takes to begin. But here's the warning, the piece that ancient texts were always careful to emphasize. Energy does not discriminate. It amplifies what you are, not what you pretend to be. You can't fake alignment. You can't force intention. The field knows, your body knows, your hands know. So don't try to use energy tools to bypass your work. Don't hold mudras hoping for miracles while your mind spins in chaos. Don't perform gestures you don't feel. That's not power. That's performance. And the field doesn't respond to performance. It responds to vibration. This is why self-honesty is the first initiation. You can only work with energy effectively when you're willing to see yourself clearly, not through the lens of guilt or shame, but through truth. What am I feeling? What am I projecting? What frequency am I reinforcing with this movement, this emotion, this posture? It's not about judgment, it's about alignment. The greatest power your hands will ever hold is the ability to bring yourself back to center, back to presence, back to now. Not by force, but by practice, by small, consistent acts of intentional motion. Run your hands over your arms when you're feeling scattered. Place them on the earth when you're ungrounded. Offer them open when you're ready to receive, and closed when you need to contain. These are not rituals you need to study. They are instincts you've forgotten. And they are coming back. You are not powerless in this world. You were simply never taught where your power lives. It lives in awareness. It lives in movement. It lives in the space between intention and gesture, where the invisible meets the real. That's where magic begins. Not the kind of magic that controls others or manipulates reality, but the deeper magic of alignment, of resonance, of shaping your world from the inside out. Your hands have never stopped transmitting. Every day, every moment, they send your state out into the world like ripples in a pond. You're doing this already. The question is, are you doing it with purpose? When your actions come from clarity, your whole life begins to shape itself around that signal. Chaos becomes order, fear becomes focus, reaction becomes response. You don't need more knowledge. You need to return to what's already within you. The quiet art of moving through life as a transmitter of coherence. The practice of holding your hands like the sacred instruments they are, not to manipulate, but to harmonize. Because when you do, everything changes, and nothing needs to be said. There is a quiet moment, one that often goes unnoticed, when you begin to sense the shift, not around you, but within. A pause in the endless current of doing, of rushing, of reacting. It's subtle, almost fragile at first, like waking up slowly after years of noise. But in that stillness, there's a realization. Your hands have always been talking. You just never learned how to listen. From birth, you've used them, to grab, to hold, to point. As a child, you reached for the world with them, innocent and eager. You discovered textures, temperature, the shape of what's real. You explored with your palms before your words could catch up. But no one told you then, and likely not since, that those hands were speaking in a language older than sound. You see, your hands don't just interpret the world, they imprint on it. Every gesture is a signature, every motion a message, and that message doesn't vanish once the hand rests. It lingers, it reverberates, it alters the field, leaving behind a trail of intention. And it doesn't need belief to function. That's the part most people miss. This isn't spiritual only if you believe it is. It's energetic regardless. The human energy field, what some call the aura, the electromagnetic body, the subtle system, responds to motion and thought and emotion alike. You don't get to opt out. You're inside it always. You live within a grid of vibration, and your hands are one of the primary tools through which you influence it. What's projected doesn't wait for you to be ready. It just reflects what you are. That's why some people feel drained after social contact, why others feel wired or heavy after conflict. That's not just emotional residue, it's vibrational exchange. The field received what your hands expressed, even if you didn't realize you were expressing anything at all. And so it becomes essential, vital even, to return to conscious use of this ancient instrument, to stop flinging energy into the world unconsciously and start shaping it with presence. Because without that shift, life keeps happening on autopilot, and you remain a transmitter unaware of what you're transmitting. So, what happens when you do become aware? What unfolds when you start aligning your inner world with the movements of your hands? The first thing you notice is how often you move from habit, from reflex. A scratching of the head, a clench of the fists, a crossing of the arms, not meaningless, not neutral. These motions are responses, born out of subtle internal signals: fear, frustration, protection. Every one of them contributes to your energetic broadcast, and the world responds to that broadcast with uncanny consistency. It starts to become clear why you attract certain dynamics, why chaos keeps cycling, why peace feels elusive. Because you're not just thinking your experience, you're physically shaping it. Your body is not a passive bystander, it's an active creator. And your hands are often the front line of that creation. Think of them like styluses on a tablet. Whatever you trace into the field with them stays imprinted until it's consciously cleared or replaced. And if you've been unconsciously scribbling worry, resentment, judgment, or fear, you've been reinforcing those patterns in the fabric of your life. But the moment you become aware, everything changes. Awareness gives you access to the eraser. You begin to see movement as ritual. You start moving slower, not from laziness, but from presence. You stop flinging your hands when you speak, unless it's purposeful. You notice when your fingers tighten and ask yourself, what am I resisting right now? You open your palms when you feel overwhelmed, not because it fixes everything immediately, but because it sends a new signal, one of receptivity, one of trust. These small shifts accumulate. This is not about aesthetics or appearing calm. This is about energetic hygiene. The same way you cleanse your body with water, you begin cleansing your field with motion, with breath, with shape. You begin intuitively brushing the field around your body, as if wiping off invisible static. You start to trace symbols in the air, not because someone taught you a technique, but because your body begins remembering. Movement becomes meaningful again. And as you build this relationship with your hands, you start to feel their intelligence, not metaphorically, but literally. You'll feel your palms get warm in certain moments, tingly in others. You'll notice they respond to your thoughts, to the emotions you try to suppress, to the silence between words. You'll hold your hand near someone and sense something shift between you and them, or within yourself. That's energy speaking. That's the field responding. And with practice, you begin to listen without needing explanation. Not everything must be understood to be real. The hands know what your mind hasn't caught up with yet. In those moments, the ancient practices begin to make sense, not as foreign traditions, but as echoes of something innately human. The way monks form their fingers into mudras, the way indigenous shamans trace invisible paths during healing rites, the way priests lift their hands in benediction. These aren't performative gestures. They are vibrational codes. Different hands, different times, different places, but always the same language. It is not cultural copying, it is convergence. Because energy has rules, and the human form was built to play by them. And here's where you realize something else. Form is not random. Your fingers, your bones, your palms, they are structured according to principles found across the cosmos. The golden ratio isn't just in galaxies and seashells. It's in your joints, your digits, the spacing of your fingers when relaxed. Sacred geometry didn't originate from mathematicians. It was observed in life, everywhere, including you. So when your hands move, they are capable of reflecting those universal patterns. And when they reflect them, they harmonize with them. That's what resonance means, not matching by appearance, but by frequency. This is why some shapes calm you immediately, why holding your fingers in a certain way grounds your nervous system. It's not psychological suggestion, it's entrainment. Your energy syncs with the shape, and the shape, when aligned with universal pattern, restores order. That's the hidden technology of your body, and it's not lost. It's simply been ignored. Imagine waking up every day and beginning with 3 minutes of stillness, hands held in a mudra that supports focus. No words, no demands, just breath and shape. Over time, your nervous system adapts, your emotional center stabilizes, your inner chaos quiets. Not because life got easier, but because you became coherent. Now multiply that practice over weeks, months. Your entire energy field reorganizes. You begin to emit a frequency others can feel. You notice less conflict, more flow. Not because others changed, but because your signal did. People don't respond to your words. They respond to your field. And your hands shape your field every single day. This is the foundation of energetic sovereignty. The realization that what you carry, what you transmit, what you reinforce, it's all yours. Not someone else's responsibility. Not random, yours. And when you own that fully, something powerful emerges. The ability to choose again. You don't like what your field is attracting? Shift the signal. Start with your hands. Bring them to your heart. Feel the pulse. That's coherence knocking. Let your breath meet your palms. Let your thoughts slow down to match the stillness of your body. And then move, gently, slowly, intentionally. Let that gesture carry the message. I am here, I am aligned, I am listening. That's all it takes. The field listens. It always has. There is a moment, perhaps subtle, but unmistakable, when the awareness you've been cultivating doesn't just live in your mind. It drops into your body. It lands in your bones, in your breath, in the simple, steady motion of your hands. That's when you know this isn't about theory anymore. It's not an idea you admire from a distance. It's something you live. At that point, intention and movement aren't separate. You don't have to remind yourself to be present. You don't have to force alignment. It begins to happen as naturally as your heartbeat. Your hands become extensions of your energy, not because you studied every gesture, but because you remembered how to feel. This is what embodiment really means. Not pretending to be peaceful, not adopting a posture. It's the lived reality of coherence. Your field stabilizes, your nervous system listens, your breath becomes your compass, and your hands, silent, alert, powerful, become your language. Not for others, for the universe itself. This language doesn't need translation. It doesn't ask for belief. It responds only to clarity, to consistency, to sincerity. That's the secret people have always known, the ones who carry presence without needing attention, the ones whose gestures shift the tone of a room, who listen more than they speak, who extend a hand not just to help, but to harmonize. You've met people like this. Maybe you've been one without knowing it, the ones who seem calm in the chaos, who don't flinch at noise, who bring order simply by being still. That stillness isn't passive, it's active resonance. It's the vibration of someone who understands what they're sending out into the world. And now you do too. You understand that the tiniest motion, a hand raised, fingers laced, palms turned upward, isn't just physical. It's directional. It's instructional. The field around you is always listening, always reflecting. It doesn't punish or reward. It matches. It responds. So when you move from fear, it reflects instability. When you move from presence, it echoes clarity. And that's what makes this knowledge so powerful, and why it was hidden in plain sight for so long. You see, people who move from their own frequency can't be controlled. They're not reactive. They don't follow narratives built to trigger chaos. They pause, they breathe, they notice, and then they choose. They choose to move intentionally. They choose to stay coherent. They choose to shape, not scatter. And they begin shaping not just their own lives, but the shared field we all live in. Because the truth is, this isn't just about you. Yes, your hands are your personal tools for energy, but what you do with them doesn't stay contained. Your frequency ripples. It affects others. And when enough people move from the same centered place, the collective begins to shift. Not through force, through frequency. This is how transformation really happens. Not from the top down, not from protests or arguments alone, but from inside out, one person at a time, waking up, feeling again, remembering again, moving again, but with purpose this time. That's how the field begins to recalibrate, through quiet choices, through grounded motion, through simple gestures infused with awareness. Imagine a world where people started their mornings not with alarms and headlines and social feeds, but with 3 minutes of stillness, hands in a shape that brings them back to center. breath in rhythm, intention soft but clear. What kind of world would that become? A world where people didn't react instantly, but responded deliberately. A world where emotional energy wasn't flung like debris, but shaped like clay. A world where children were taught not just to write or wave or point, but to feel the energy in their hands and use it with care. That's not utopia. That's a possibility already blooming beneath the surface, because it's already happening. More people are waking up to their own energetic reality. More are learning to trust sensation over stimulus. More are remembering that healing isn't always loud. Sometimes it's silent. Sometimes it's the hand that rests gently on your own chest during a hard moment. Sometimes it's the fingers spread wide as you let go of what you were never meant to carry. Sometimes it's nothing more than still palms, held together in quiet resolve. These are not theatrics. They're instructions to the field. And now you know how to give them. Now you know that when you raise your hand in intention, the field adjusts. That when your movements align with your heart and breath, the vibration expands. That when you stop treating your body like a machine, it stops behaving like one. It becomes what it was always meant to be, a living conduit for awareness. And your hands, they become conductors, interfaces, instruments of realignment. You don't need robes or rituals to activate this. You need practice, not perfection. Practice. That means returning to presence 1,000 times a day if you must, noticing the tension, pausing the motion, shifting the frequency, not to impress, but to clear, not to perform, but to anchor. It means touching your life with care, holding a loved one with focus, washing your face like it matters, typing with presence, gesturing with purpose. That's the quiet revolution. That's the signal that rewrites the noise, not with violence, not with escape, but with alignment. This is the power no one can take from you, because it lives in your awareness, in your skin, in the way you show up to this moment, and the next, and the one after that. There will be days you forget. You'll move unconsciously. You'll react. That's okay. This isn't about perfection. It's about return, again and again. Back to breath, back to stillness, back to the hands. They're always with you. They've always been ready. You're not starting from scratch. You're continuing something ancient, something sacred, something deeply, beautifully human. So walk into your day not just with goals or plans, but with a vibration. Let your hands remember what your mind forgot. Let them guide you, not through doing more, but through doing differently. And when you extend them, extend coherence. When you rest them with reverence. When you use them like the tools of energy they are. You don't need to explain it to anyone. Just live it. And others will feel it, even if they can't name it, because energy speaks. And your hands, they've always been fluent. Now that you remember, you move differently. Now that you feel, you create intentionally. Now that you know, you become a signal, not noise. Signal. The world is listening.